You just assume the men are starting the violence, just as the feminists that attacked Erin Pizzey did. It's another round of these are not facts, they're just things you made up to justify your feelings. Today's contestant, Sly9, left this comment on a video I did about why Erin Pizzey's men's house failed. And Sly, I got some bad news. You may want to be seated for this, because not only am I not assuming, but my source for this is Erin Pizzey herself. Erin Pizzey is widely credited for opening the first domestic violence shelter for women in 1971. 5 years later, in the summer of 1976, she opened a home for men. But had the people who love to come in my comments to defend Erin Pizzey ever read any of her books, then they would know that that home was not for male victims of violence, but for the male perpetrators. Erin's first book, Scream Quietly or the Neighbours Will Hear, got a reprint in 1977, with a new introduction written by Erin Pizzey in autumn of 1976, shortly after she had acquired and opened the men's house. Erin writes, there is now also a men's house, which offers therapy and is open 24 hours a day for urgent need as well as regular group meetings. It is available to any of the husbands of the battered women, or any man who will accept the fact that he is violent. Previously, they would have been offered tranquilizers and custodial care, but now they can be involved in understanding their own problems. And as I covered in the video about the men's shelter, the people who were willing to donate to Erin's women's shelter were unsurprisingly not so willing to donate to a shelter for male abusers, and it was forced to close shortly after it was opened. Scream Quietly got an American reprint, also in 1977, but by then the men's house had already closed, and Erin talks about it in the introduction. I bitterly regret we had to close the project for husbands because of a lack of funds. The work was done in cooperation with the violent partner, who admitted his violence and discussed his rage and anger, in the safe and secure understanding that we did not consider him a brute, but a badly damaged child. In Jean Renvoiset's Web of Violence from 1978, she talks about Erin's work with domestic violence shelters. She also talks about the men's house, which Jean actually visited. It soon became obvious to Erin Pizzey that the husbands themselves needed as much help as their wives did. In the summer of 1976, she was able to persuade the GLC to lease her a house in Islington. I use the past tense because a few weeks ago the men's house was forced to close, owing to a lack of funds. The basic aim was to provide a community where battering men could live while they attempted to change their lifestyles. And in case you still doubt that Erin's men's shelter was for abusive men, Jean interviews one of the men in the shelter, and trigger warning for an incredibly casual description of violence. Of Henry, she writes, he expected things to go his way without bothering too much about other people's feelings. But he had never wanted to hit people before. Now, he explained to me, if he gets irritated, he just lashes out. Like when Evie tries to tell me something and I don't understand her English. Why don't you speak English better? I say to her. Bang, wallop. I can't understand you. Bang, wallop, wham. He smiles as he says bang and wallop and is quite unperturbed by the fact that Evie is sitting right beside him. He pulls up her skirt to show me the yellowing bruises where he had hit her a few nights previously and seems rather proud of them. These were the men being housed in Erin Pizzey's men's shelter. And sensing that perhaps her sympathy for these abusive men would not be shared by everyone else, Erin has modified the story over the years to make it more palatable.
I knew that we needed a house for men. Men who were perpetrators or men who were victims, but we needed to replicate what we had. And then those days it was called the GLC, the Greater London Council, and they gave me a big house for peppercorn rent in the north of London. It was a gorgeous house.
First, the men's house became a shelter for both male perpetrators and male victims, which of course makes absolutely no sense, having male victims of violence living alongside dangerously violent men. Instead, Erin used the generational nature of abuse to reframe those perpetrators as themselves victims. After all, a man who batters is a child who was battered that nobody helped, as she would say. So the story changed again, and the fact it was for male perpetrators of violence was dropped entirely, with those violent men themselves rebranded as victims.
I went to the GLC and I actually said, I need a house for men, for abused men. And bless his heart, because the man I've got who was going to give me the house understood what I was telling him. And he did give me a house, a lovely house in North London, a big, comfortable house.
Now this should anger every male survivor of violence. It should anger every advocate for male survivors of violence. It should anger everyone, period. It should turn your stomach. that this woman waved in our faces at every opportunity as the poor put upon advocate of male survivors, was instead a vocal advocate for male batterers who has spent the last 50 years hiding that fact and rehabilitating her image by spinning an entirely fabricated story, and helped in that process by the very groups that claim to support male survivors. And we are so eager to reject the narrative of our culture's unhealthy obsession with violence to blame everything on feminism that we let them. We believe every word of the lie without question. It is a depressingly tragic and frankly cruel joke that our culture's endorsement of men's violence is so broad and without shame that an advocate for male batterers, read her book, these are some of the most vile and violent men to have ever existed, can successfully label those men as victims. And we will celebrate and champion her for it. So desperate to ignore, minimize, and reverse men's role in violence that we never bother to stop and check with the very survivors we are claiming to advocate for if any of this is even true.